Welcome back to Playing to Win, Episode 6, Practice Makes Perfect. I'm so excited to have this one to go over just the do's and don'ts, what we need to know about our experiences while playing Halo, the theory of playing Halo, and what are the fundamentals and building blocks of Halo. Joining me as always, we have our co-host, Zane Heron. You know him as Penguin. What's up, Zane? We got another one.
Hey Travis, feels good to be back. I've been gaming, streaming a ton, so it's good to be back on the podcast doing one of these. What's going on?
Yeah, man. I mean, last episode was content creation, and you're out there creating content, so it's pretty fun to watch and see you do your thing on those streams, man.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Well, let's go over episode 6. Practice makes perfect. We've got a really informational based program today. We've got FPS theory, what it is. How do we do it, and what do we learn from it, right? Like, how do we practice Halo theory, right?
And you know, just FPS games as like a whole in general, especially like arena shooters in particular.
Right, yeah. How do you improve in the game and show progress? I think that one, we were talking before the podcast, Zane, about just, it's a common question that everyone's asking, right?
It is literally what I get asked all the time. I get asked at least every single day, like, what should I do? Like, what do I do to get better? Like, every time I'm streaming, someone comes in and asks a question.
Right. It's a common question. It's a sought after question. I think we got some great answers on this podcast. And then living a pro life. What does it mean to be a pro? How do you become a pro? The life in the shoes of a pro. I think that's always a fun topic to understand what that feels like, right?
It can be crazy. Not a lot of people know.
Yeah, and from a fan's perspective, I think it'd be a great insight. How do games evolve over time, and how do we adapt to them? So old Halos, new technology, the progression of everything that we're going through with new consoles, PCs. How do you keep up with the time, and how do we learn from the previous past games?
I think Halo is actually like a great one for that, considering like the differences in the new Halos versus the old one, like slow versus fast, like whatever you want to call it, like lots of difference in our game.
Yeah. Why is Halo important to esports? I think that one's really fun.
Especially with who we have coming on. Like Halo is like one of the oldest esports. Like it might be like at this point, like it's been around for a very long time, and it really started like to kick off esports, if anything.
Right. How do the fundamentals of Halo transfer into other games? I think we've seen it kind of happening recently in Call of Duty scene and other scenes, Apex Legends. We've seen a lot of Halo pros turn to other games and those fundamentals kind of carrying through into those. I think that's kind of a fascinating thing, and I'd like to know a little bit more in depth on that topic. And then to conclude, what needs to be done on launch day of Infinite for the game to be fundamentally successful? That's a heavy-weighted question.
There has to be no heavy aim. Straight. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. No, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's just, what is it going to take to make a game or any game successful? Well, without further ado, let's take a moment to introduce our guest, Dave Walsh, aka Walshy. He's the first athlete to be sponsored by Red Bull. He's the only Halo player that has his DNA in space, and he has the longest winning streak in Halo. He's also a maverick of the industry, a entrepreneur, and really just set the building blocks and foundation to Halo as we know it from a competitive scene. He can also be found behind the desk as an analyst and commentator, and I'm just so excited to have him here. What's up, Dave? Welcome to Playing to Win, man.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Dude, it's going good. What's up, Captain Clutch? Throwback.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. So glad to have you on here, Dave. I before this podcast, I was doing some research on you, and it is a long list of achievements, accolades, and successes. Could you just kind of give us a background as to what got you started in Halo, and what does Halo as a game and a franchise mean to you?
Oh, man. There's a lot in there.
That's a deep question.
How did I get first started in Halo? First started playing with my brother. He was in college at the time. I was in high school at the time. I went over to the house they stayed at in college, and one day we played like 3-person free-for-alls, or maybe we did like 1v2 Team Slayer or something with my brother and one of my good friends, Steve. And I instantly fell in love with the game. I think for a lot of people, it was one of the first console shooters that just felt like it got movement and looking done right. Prior to that, you had like, you had N64 and PlayStation and certain things that came out, but like you couldn't really do a proper shooter as how we know it today, like compared to like something like GoldenEye. And so that part felt good to me. The other part early on with Halo, I just even noticed that my very first time playing was like I just felt like I was getting outplayed in so many ways against somebody who had played more than me. Like Halo 1, like he would start using something like the plasma rifle and I'd like be frozen in place and he'd like circle me and melee me, or I would just feel like I would get skillfully outshot by the pistol or like hit by an awesome grenade, and just it always felt like every death I had, I could have done something different or better. And I think that's really special about Halo. And I would say that's really special about pretty much every top competitive game is like you leave much less to like this randomness or unluckiness or whatever. You can evaluate and be like, wow, I could have recognized this or done this or done this. And I feel like I saw that my very first time playing Halo. And then what was the other part of that question? I feel like there's 2 or 3 parts in there.
Yeah, I asked a
There's like
long-winded
4
one. I'm
parts.
just excited to have you on here, Dave. I think that you're just a pillar in this community, and someone I think that as a community looks up to. And so, as Halo as a franchise, what does that mean to you?
Halo as a franchise has been clearly a big part of my life for what, over half my life now? So that's something in itself that's like, all right, half my life, this thing has been a major staple of it. At some points in my life, it was my full time job. Other parts of my life, I was, in a more of a part time role, whether it's traveling to a tournament or doing different marketing endeavors. But regardless, in some significant way, Halo has been a part of my life for over half my life. So that's one big piece of it. And then I do think Halo helped shape the landscape. Halo and especially with MLG leading the way and leading that charge, really shaped the landscape for competitive gaming in North America, and more specifically, console gaming in North America. Because there was still competitive gaming in a very prominent fashion, stuff like Counter-Strike that was big in North America and across the world, and but I think MLG and Halo really brought this to like a mainstream audience, and also showed like the like entertainment value and skill level of something that can be done on a console.
Yeah. That's
Yes,
awesome.
that's crazy. Halo's been a part of your life for half your life. I'm at like 75% of mine. You're talking about you're playing Halo in high school. You're talking about Halo CE. Dude, I was 4 years old when Halo CE came out. Some Halo pros weren't even born when Halo CE came out. I don't even think Shotzi was born yet.
They're not, and I mean we can get into that later.
Franchise.
We can get into that later.
Oh, yeah.
But I was gonna say like that's a huge part of like I would say the massive skill increase we've seen throughout the years. I'm obviously a very decorated player. Was arguably one of the best at the time when I was competing. But at some point when you're competing in later years against people that have been able to hold an Xbox controller since they were able to physically pick it up or play the game, compared to learning the skills on an Xbox controller at 16 or 17 years old. I think there's years of different muscle memories that didn't get a chance to develop, but regardless, it was awesome to be at the forefront of kind of paving the way for Halo and esports.
Yeah, absolutely. And that neuroplasticity of just picking up that controller early on kind of shapes those gamers. Well, Dave, you became a caster in 2014. You kind of turned pro into analytics, and I really look forward to when you're behind the desk and casting and just breaking down those plays. I think that you have the most insight when a play happens, and you can kind of break it down as to like, this is why this happened this way, or this is why XYZ. So I'd like to just kind of start us off with the question of SPS theory, and what does it mean? How do we learn from it?
FPS theory in general, I mean that's a large topic, but we can dive into many subsects of it. But at its highest level, I mean, you're talking about different fundamentals that can go from FPS to FPS. You know, there's certain things that are going to transfer from game to game, whether that's, let's say, even the concept of somebody that's a flanker or somebody that's kind of sitting back and anchoring. You could probably find parallels to pretty much every single first-person shooter out there, and how that applies to each of those games. It applies slightly different from game to game, but you know the same concept's going to apply. You know, when I think of somebody who's like flanking in a first-person shooter or Halo specifically, I would say they have kind of two main like overarching goals. Like one is either to buy time and allow your teammates to come over and help. And so you're distracting, buying time, staying alive, and creating a window of opportunity for your teammates to take advantage of. You know, that's going to be a new gap that they can slip through. It's going to be a moment that they can catch someone else out of position. Or on the flip side of that is you're just doing damage. Like you got behind them, your teammates are now kind of like the distraction, and you are inflicting massive damage because they have no idea where you came from. You either get like that first back smack, and then you're shooting someone else in the back, and you just did so much more damage compared to some sort of like head-on encounter. Like I said, like the idea of a flanker is going to be in every single first-person shooter, and that like I said, it unravels in different ways. But in short, I would say that main concept, like those overarching concepts, really do apply probably to a flanker in every single first-person shooter. It's like they're buying time, staying alive, and distracting to have their teammates be the ones that are damage dealers, or they're on the flip side of that and they're the damage dealers while their teammates are just kind of like waiting for that big moment or buying time.
For me, for like FPS theory, like when I think about like first-person shooter games, there are usually like two or three things that come to mind. Like there's an objective most of the time, like 99% of the time. Like you have to do something to win, and then you also have to like outplay the enemy team. So play the objective, outplay the other team, and outplaying the other team usually comes down to, in Halo in particular, like slaying. So a lot of the times, you know, you talk about roles in a game, like you're saying, like the flanker, you have like people who need to slay. You have to have someone that's thinking about the objective. A lot of different things come into the thought process of this like game as a whole, like specifically in team games, that like, you know, pretty much every game is gonna have something like that, and it's something you need to know whenever you're playing that game in particular. And other players are better at certain roles, and you know, people need to know their strengths and weaknesses in order to maximize what they're capable of.
Yeah.
It's a very fair point, because, and like you said with roles as well, it's you know, it applies slightly different from game to game, but because something in Halo, you have somebody who's, like you said, is mainly objective player or slayer or whatever, but everyone does every role within Halo. In short, it's like you have tendencies where it's like, all right, yeah, at some point someone's going to run the flag, even though they might be deemed the sniper or main slayer or something. But then obviously another you know, a game like maybe like Overwatch, like somebody's like mostly like going to be like a tank, and yes, at times they're going to deal damage, but like that skews much further in a game like Overwatch, where it's like, all right, their job is to like block, and then this other DPS dealers are the ones that are dealing 10 to 20 times more damage throughout a game or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, that's a very interesting take on like all the different roles that you have that applies to all FPSs.
Yeah, and I think that was actually a great thing to bring up. You kind of differentiated like Halo from other games, especially newer games. Like they tend to have class systems, and you have like your more specific role. So like even with like Counter-Strike, like you have people that do a specific thing. You have people who are fraggers. Like, you know, in Halo, the thing that differentiates it is everyone has the same start. Like there's no different weapon that you start with. There's no like different thing that sets you apart. You are all just a part of a team. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates Halo, is everyone has to do and play like positionless almost. And I think that's where Halo's like gone in more previous years, is like everyone has to be good at every single thing. And if you aren't, it shows.
Oh, that's really profound, Zane. I think that's really interesting, because yeah, I think of like maybe not an FPS. I think the best example, you guys are using roles. League of Legends is something that comes to mind, right? You have the top laner, the mid laner, you've got the bot lane, and you got a jungler, right? And could you kind of say that those titles kind of shift into an FPS game as well? And then the other question that I'd love to hear about is the map. Is there any theory that comes into a strategy FPS map presence?
Absolutely. I mean, like, a lot of these different kind of overarching concepts we're talking about can, like I said, like slightly be twisted and turned into like pretty much every top competitive game, because that's what makes the most competitive games make that list. The fact that they have a really high skill ceiling, and
Cool.
ideally like a lower skill floor that people can jump in and start to learn and play. And they have different things you can specialize in. Specialization is really important. That's not just like, hey, there's just the one and only one skill set. Yes, in an FPS shooting, if you had to choose one skill set over anything else, is going to be arguably the most important in an FPS. However, everything else in there is really important as well. Like, how do you position yourself? How do you move across the map? How do you work with your team? How do you communicate? But I think there's no denying that, like, in FPS, if you had some sort of like skill tree and you're maxing something out, it's like, all right, if you had zero shooting skill, you're not going to be the best FPS player. What was the original question? Something around maps, and like, how does that play into like strategy and making FPS a really deep esport? Obviously, I think having robust maps out there is what gives people options and expands their creativity and their routes. And it's technically, you could put some long hallway and just have teams frag each other over and over again, like a Octagon or whatever the flag warm-up game is people do nowadays. But that's not as interesting to watch. It's not as deep of a skill set you could show off for the other teams, where they can start to now set up, get power positions, move across the map, flank, do all those sort of things. And so, the way that the maps are designed and the way that people understand what advantages exist on there, how to use those, abuse those, how to take advantage of every little inch of geometry on the map, really sets apart the top players from the amateurs.
Right. Yeah. I remember watching in Halo 5 just ground pound being manipulated to a point of movement, right? To another benefit of like how to get somewhere a little bit further on a map, and just kind of manipulating those physics that the developers made and maybe didn't intend, but as a pro gamer, you all find a good way or a smart way to exploit those mechanics, which is really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think everything Dave just hit on is kind of like the fundamentals overall of kind of any game. Like, you have individual skill, like how good are you at manipulating the things only you can manipulate? How good are you at positioning yourself on the map? What angles do you know? What parts of the map are the stronger positions versus the weaker positions? What do you want? What do you not want? And then, teamwork is like the final one to kind of round that out as I see it. It's like, how well do you work with your teammates in contrast to how well they work with you? And like, so I think Dave kind of hit everything in general almost in everything he just said.
Yeah, and if you find a spot on the map and abuse it too much, they name it after you, right, Walshy?
That is correct. If you get away enough times on a certain spot on the map, you either get that, I don't know if you should take it as a compliment or an insult. I take it as a compliment that I'm annoying enough in that spot of the map that they have to call out and name that specific spot, and they know exactly what they're talking about.
That's so cool. Yeah.
It's actually so funny you say that, because now, like, the teams I've had, if there's just an annoying spot people go to generally, we call it Walshy. We literally, like on Halo Reach, there was a spot on Zealot that didn't have an actual call out that people would just crouch in all the time. So in the middle of a scrim, I'm just like, what do I call this? Like, one shot their corner, the bridge. Like, I just said one shot their Walshy, and Eco turns around and kills the guy. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, you knew exactly what I was talking about. He knew, dude. It was so funny.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. Well, the next topic, Zaid, I'd love to have you ask this, since this is the question that you're kind of always consistently asked. And that's, how do you improve in a game and show progress?
I think people have, different points that they're at, but a lot of people, like, the most common question I get is like, what's the first thing you would tell anyone like to improve at in their own gameplay? And that's like that first thing, that individual skill. Like, if you, like Dave even said it, like, if you chose one skill to max out, it'd be your shot pretty much, or whatever. But like, yeah, you gotta like be able to keep up with other individuals. And if you're, like silver 5, like getting outgunned by all the diamond players, then that's the main thing you need to work on, because 99% of the time, whatever situation you're in, if you could just shoot out of it, you'd probably be fine. You wouldn't get much, you wouldn't get much of anything out of watching film. It'd be like pee-wee football players watching film. Like, you don't even know what you're doing yet in order to be like watching that film. So that's like my first advice, is like work on your individual skill.
Yeah. Dave, any sage knowledge as to improve in game and show progress?
Yeah. I think it depends on the level that you're at. And so I think there are different baby steps in there, kind of like what Penguin was hinting at. That's like, hey, if you're just really starting off, you don't need to learn the most intricate strategies and things that exist out there. You should be able to start running around the map, understand how the map is all perfectly laid out. Like, you should be able to like start shooting and start to eventually you'll develop that a lot naturally. Like, I can't fully speak to some of the newer skill sets out there, something like aim labs and whatnot. Like, I'm not sure if those are like the most beneficial ways to increase your aim, but like one of the harsh realities of Halo and top games is that we really have yet to prove a more beneficial way to improve at the game outside playing the game itself. Like, diminishing returns at some points are returns, and that's one of the problems that also does exist in the esports space as well, because we do see a lot of burnout in the space. But playing the game a lot, just getting used to shooting and playing, and like I said, that sounds very obvious, but like what that eventually leads to is, as you start to get some of those skill sets down a bit more, where it's like, you know how to navigate the map without thinking about it more. You know how to shoot a bit more without just being like fully tunnel visioned and unable to focus on other parts. You start to like free up more brain space to start to make more decisions throughout that time. So no longer are you now like, what's around this corner? How's this map go and how do I navigate around it? You're now thinking, okay, is this person going to bank this nade here? And if so, I'm going to jump and go this way, or thrust this way, or I'm going to duck out this way. Like, you start to think about what actually is going to be going on there, and then also like coordinating with your teammates and calling out, versus like using all of your focus and energy on what are going to be like more basic or fundamental skills that you really do need to pay attention to early on.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. I mean, I remember Zane saying that, and I've also watched a couple of your Twitch clips and everything of just instant nades and how difficult that is to pull off in Halo. I mean, how long did it take you to get that dialed in?
I wish I could find some old hard drives, because I actually have a clip of me in 2008 doing 2 back-to-back instas on Guardian. Because on Guardian, they have those plasmas that spawn back in that shotgun room. And, I didn't really have like Heretic or anything back then to like practice and learn how to do it. But like I knew of it back then. And so like I have at least one time, like in 2008, where I was able to do like 2 back-to-back and get like a double or 3 kills or whatever with that, when I had like oddball. And to me, it was, I got it more mastered when like something like Heretic came out. Like, I literally would just like run around, play a bunch of free-for-alls and practice it nonstop, and people would just be like, wait, what the hell was that? And I'd be like, I don't know, man, that was so random or unlucky. I don't know how that got you. But I like literally got to a point where like I truly believed like I had like instas nearly like mastered, as people were kind of like just figuring them out and like trying to understand what the heck they were, like in the Halo 3 competitive days.
Dave's speaking to something so fun, like when a game's like fresh and new and you go out and like find this thing that nobody else knows and you like master it. For like Halo 5, like the movement's crazy. So like before that first Worlds, I'm like running around maps like thrusting my shins into boxes, just flying 100 feet in the air, and it's like that's what I did at Worlds to get camo every time on Fathom. But like that's just like something I miss so much, dude. Just to like speak to that a little bit.
Yeah,
it's so exciting. Yeah, it's the mark of a great game.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, the next question is living a pro life. I think that actually this falls into it. A new game comes out. What's it like being a pro from a competitive side? Thinking about strategy, going against, you just said like no one even really knew about instant nading when that happened, right? And you were keeping those secrets to yourself, right? That's some sense of competitive play in these esports. And can you just talk about just living a pro life and through that developing that game from a competitive side with your team? And
so first off, like when it did come to like instas or any sort of stuff, like any sort of strategy or mechanics, I always like treated our team as like I always wanted to have like us as like an open whiteboard. Like we wanted to like be able to share ideas. Like you want to learn as much as you can from each other and impose it on your teammates as well, because that's just going to make you all stronger. If you are able to teach your teammate one little cool trick that you think you know in this one area that helps you stay alive a lot, and they're able to now use that when they're in a game, they're going to stay alive, and they teach you something new that you stay alive in a certain spot or that you can use, you just all become better as a unit and as individuals. And I like to have that mindset when I'm on a team. But the other part that you're asking is like, hey, as you're learning like new mechanics, like how's that go? I think I have a pretty like logical approach or assessment on like what's viable and what's not, and that's always worked for me in the past. Like for example, in Halo 2, if you remember, in like 2005, melees did like no damage. Like it would take like something like 5 or 7 melees to get a kill, and so it was like I remember at one point late or like some point in 2005, someone showed me a BXR. They're like, you jump, do a jumping melee, hit X and shoot and hit him in the head with his carbine. And I was like, that's not viable. Like, you know, I could see like I understood. I was like, wow, yeah, that's a really fast kill, and like that seems to work in like this, you know, you're hitting someone that's standing still and whatever, but like there was really no way to apply that in 2005. But once they changed how powerful melees were, it was like that changed the game completely. It's like, oh, well, now that I have like this reset button, you can do like, you know, back-to-back melees or a melee X shot with the battle rifle versus like the carbine with the one headshot. Because I don't know exactly how many bullets need to hit in the BXR. Like I don't believe it's just one. So I think like with that jumping melee headshot example, that's why they even used the carbine when they first showed it in 2005 to me. So I didn't first discover like the X reset or anything, but I at least was able to see something and say not viable now, and then like assess viability later. And so like I think I've had that same sort of mindset when I, you know, see a lot of different things bubble up in the game. I'm like, oh, like I don't really see much of application like for that, or like holy crap, I could do this with with plasma grenades in Halo 3. Okay, I think this could be severely abused.
You know, speaking more to the bringing that more of a living a pro life and like, you know, exploring new mechanics, new whatever as a game comes out. I think the thing that pros will do differently from like, you know, your standard player, like competitive players will do this too, even if they're not professional, but they will just sit there for hours and hours and hours just running through a map, like figuring out what you can do. Even if it's like useless knowledge, you might gain like 1% of that time might find you something that's just like crazy productive, and that's like so worth it. So I know like as a game comes out, and like not just Halo Infinite, but like any game that comes out, like people will just like will grind the mechanics and figure out how to be as best they can individually. Like that's what I did when Halo 5 came out. I would play for 8 hours and then I'd sit in like a custom game with the timer turned on unlimited, and it'd be like I'd go to bed at 2 a.m. and I'd be in that Fathom flag game for 3 hours and 37 minutes, and I learned maybe one thing.
yeah,
It is important, I think, also to like discover things. Not, I shouldn't say discover on your own, but to do your due diligence and explore them and learn kind of on your own. Like rather than taking somebody's word for like, hey, it takes this many bullets or of damage and a melee to do to kill somebody or whatever. It's like, all right, like let me test this a few times. Like let me see like if I hit only 5 battle rifle bullets and a melee versus 6 battle rifle bullets and melee. And like being able to like do that, not only do I feel like you're able to confirm that is the case, but also, at least for me personally, I felt like I was able to like learn it and retain it better. You know how like at some points when people are like in class, if you take notes or if you write this down, you retain that better or whatever. Like I think that sort of sentiment applies at least to me in games where it's like I need to confirm this, I need to test it out, I need to try it, and then I understand it better.
yeah, you take that hypothesis and you kind of put the science to work kind of thing, right? So, Dave, what makes a professional player in your definition? I mean, what's the definition of a pro player in esports to you?
In the very most literal sense is you make enough money to make a living. Like, and I know that's kind of stupid, but like, and you not the question that you're asking, but you know, I get I've had that question asked sometimes in different interviews where people are like, how many points do I need to be considered a pro player? And it's like, well, there's different definitions. Everyone's gonna have a different definition. You might be like considered like an MLG pro, like based on their definition of placing like top 16 at this event or whatever. But like end of the day, you're a professional. You could be a professional anything if you are making a living at that craft. And so that's my definition of pro player. But like, what sets apart a pro player? Like, what makes them a pro? Like, why are they? What skill sets do they have, or what do they do to attain a living at that? That one, it's a bit deeper. I mean, obviously, being one of the best in the world, and like, how do you get to be one of the best in the world? Finding ways to continually improve. I think like some people will look at certain areas and be like, yes, there's always this nature versus nurture, like natural talent versus curated or crafted talent. I think it's a mix. I don't think you can just take anybody out there and just be like, all right, they can train the most hours in the world and they'll be guaranteed the best in the world. Like, it doesn't work like that. There's clearly some inherent skills that translate, in my opinion. And then I think the bigger part for me, as far as like a top pro in Halo or any game, is the ability to continue improving. And that first starts off a lot with like your shot or the main skill that's important in that game. But it's their ability to improve and adapt through whatever different metas take place in that game, or understand how to move around the map, or like learn from your mistakes and not plateau. Because I think you'll see a lot of different people start to get in different ruts. They'll like get to a certain level and then they'll kind of like stay flat at that level. And so I think being able to hit those plateaus and then acknowledge or recognize what mistakes you're making or what ways you can improve and continue to get better.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a really fun definition. I mean, Zane, what do you think? What makes a professional gamer to you?
Outside of the making a living thing, because that's harder in some games versus others, but like it's being the best at that game. Like, just straight up, like if you're like not in like the top 8, I guess like you can take placements, might be a little bit more opinionated, or top A is pro, top 4 is pro, whatever. But like it's just being one of the best players. And I think the thing that, like Dave was saying, that separates pros from the lower tiers and like the amateurs and whatnot is their ability to improve and their ability to be consistent. And a lot of amateurs get to this certain point of individual skill, and they keep up with like a lot of the pros shot wise, a lot of the pros movement wise. So I guess my advice for them would be like to look at what you can't do as an individual at that point. Because I talked about individual skill, I talked about map presence. Now it comes down to teamwork. Like, how could you be a better teammate? And one thing like I kind of wanted to talk about was like climbing as an amateur. And I think you have to take it one step at a time. So you have to get to a certain point individually, and then you have to get to a certain point as a teammate. And a lot of the times that could be like who you know, not necessarily how good you are. So be a nice person, like straight up. If you want to like climb that ladder, like be friendly, like make friends that are better, because chances are when you play with better players, like Dave was talking about how he would share all this stuff with his teammates that would help them get better too. You're probably going to get better as a player because you're going to continue recognizing like what they do well as a teammate. So yeah, I would say definitely just be kind to help climb that ladder.
Yeah, from just that avid fan perspective, what I think that makes a pro player is just that FPS knowledge, that theory. I feel like they just, maybe you guys can attest to this, but that knowledge of the map and that knowledge of the actual theory of a first-person shooter is just, that knowledge base is a lot stronger than the casual gamer or the amateur gamer who is trying to get into the scene, but maybe not putting as much hours into it, and doing that practice makes perfect kind of preach that we've been kind of talking about lately. Do you guys kind of agree on that? Maybe just that knowledge and intelligence kind of coming into play of that, reviewing the X and O's and reviewing the plays and what makes a good play and what makes something happen proper.
Yeah, I think like within Halo, it's definitely a mix of like that shot / FPS theory / knowledge, because like, end of the day, like I don't think it can be understated also how important having like a good shot is in the game, because imagine you had a bot in the game that like moved and never missed, hit
It's
100%
so
of
funny
shots,
you're
like
saying this.
you just send that down like a spot. It's like that is going to be so freaking strong, even if it does like a lot. It could be much better if it does the perfect movements and stuff. But like if it's winning all its fights, doing all the damage, like that is so important. So like one, I don't think you can understate how important getting that individual skill is, and that's why it's also so exciting to watch. Top Halo players play, or top of sort of any craft. I think you look at like any sort of craft, whether it's a game, whether it's a sport, in many ways, like what's really interesting to us is like some mastery of like physics, and you start to see stuff that's like, wow, I don't think I can really do that. Or like that is executed on such a ridiculous level, and yeah, I think that's that part can't be understated. But then yeah, it comes down to, like you said, that second part, like of theory of like decision making. Why did they go push towards the hill, or why'd they push away from the hill, or why'd they go do this? Like their positioning, how they influencing spawns. Like there's just so many small decisions that are made throughout the game that overall just add up in the right direction towards a win or a loss. Like you do you might make 7 correct decisions in a row and then 1 mistake, and then another 3 correct decisions and maybe 2 or 3 mistakes, and it's like you're just eventually kind of building the narrative of that game, over the course of a 15-minute game of Halo. Like the more things that you're doing correct, the fewer mistakes you're making, the more likely that your team is pushing towards a victory.
Yeah.
I kind of like everything you brought up there. It's funny you brought up you'd make a bot that just like never missed, because I was talking to someone about that the other day. Like chess has like the bots that tell you the best move, and you might make a move and it's like, oh, you made the 40th best move. It's like, dang, I should probably never make that move ever again. Yeah, just don't miss. That's the advice. No, but seriously, I think that's like kind of a good take. Shot can't be understated, and I guess what separates a pro is like they hit this certain threshold of everything together. And that could be shot. Like, some people just have this like amazing, crazy individual skill that if they're not as good at this other objective teamwork area, that it can be kind of like, well, that's okay. Like you're killing everybody in sight. Like you're fine. I'll team with you. I'll pick up the slack in this area if you pick up the slack in this area. You have to hit a certain threshold, a certain like overall, I guess. Like, oh, my shot 5 stars. My objective play 2 stars. Okay, well your shot's 5 stars. Like you're on the team.
Jackal with a beam rifle, right?
Literally Jackal with a beam rifle. If you're the Jackal with the beam rifle, dude, you're making $1 billion in Halo.
Well, let's just segue into, I think, a really fun question, and it's why Halo is important to esports, and what has Halo done for esports as we know it today?
Yeah, I think it's, first off, like I said, really sparked console esports and how big console esports was able to get. Prior to that, there were many other PC titles that I'm sure had like bigger scenes, times bigger prize money than Halo. The StarCraft scene was so well developed in Korea, was light years ahead of us in that sense. But like Halo really inspired a generation, and it was just that right combination of the game was so good. We had a lot of great personalities in the scene. MLG executed and brought to a mainstream audience. There was a clear path for somebody to go from like amateur to pro, and you saw the best rising to the top. In my opinion, like it was really special, where Halo wasn't just only a team game. You also had these individual avenues, which I think really sets Halo apart from many other esports out there, where it's like, if you knew that you could go to an MLG, if you were placed in like top 8 in a free-for-all and you weren't already on a top 8 team, people were eyeing you. Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get on like a top team after that, but you would notice pretty much all the top 16 in the free-for-all would be like, 15 or 14 members on top 4 or 8 teams, and then you would notice like some outlier. You'd notice like a Pistola. You're like, I wonder if that kid's going to go anywhere. We'll see. And it just proved tournament after tournament or season after season that people could shine with their individual skill, rise to the top in Halo. And I think, like I said, that whole combination of a really well-established scene, mainstream audience, a great path, what I consider to be a good path for amateurs to rise to the pro level and get the limelight. I think it all really existed there within Halo, and really set the stage for competitive console esports, and really set a more of a standard here in North America for esports tournaments. So besides being like a pillar for the North American esports scenes and the console esports scene, I think the part where it inspired that generation of these next players. You see all these top tier talents nowadays that will credit a lot of their interest in early Halo to where they're at now. You see somebody like a Ninja, a Courage, a Nick Merckx, a Nadeshot, all these people that are literally changing the industry and leading the industry in so many different facets, were inspired by the early Halo esport days.
Yeah, I know Summit and Dr. Disrespect are always hyping on Halo as well. I think that they're, that's maybe what turned some of them into gaming as well. And it's really curious as to where orgs came from, organizations. And is that did MLG make that happen with orgs and kind of getting that started in the competitive scene with esports, or?
No, there was plenty of orgs that existed prior to MLG, and then MLG's model was ambitious, and they had their goal with what they wanted to do with their model, but it was also very it was monopolistic, and it really did more in hindsight, more harm than good with the model they tried to do with the teams back then. But prior to that, there was stuff like already like Team 3D, Complexity. I'm sure Envy spawned a little bit later, but like Evil Geniuses, I believe all those existed prior to Halo Esports. And in fact, they joined in onto the MLG. Yeah, I was part of Team 3D in 2005 with the Ogres and Saiyan, and they already had all their sponsors with like the real Saiyan, he says.
I'm just kidding, Tommy. I'm just kidding.
But they already had like a slew of like different computer peripheral sponsors, like Intel and all sort of things. And so yeah, definitely esport orgs existed prior to that, and I think it was quite a bit of a different industry back then. How was it powered by money? How much by like venture capital money or raised money versus like more of these like bootstraps, bootstrap orgs, or run a little bit more lean or profitable.
Something I wanted to touch on kind of like more recently, I guess, as far as like why Halo Esports is like important, is you see a lot of these like or I guess the biggest console console kind of now, because they play on PC, but Call of Duty is probably like the biggest console FPS game right now. And you have to be 18 plus to compete in Call of Duty, unlike say Fortnite, which Fortnite's on PC. Like you can be a teenager and be competing on that, and it's crazy to see all these like younger players like playing and coming up and being like 16 or whatever, winning millions of dollars. Like that's insane. But Halo 5 when it first came out was 18 plus, and then eventually they got that to I think any age limit with parent permission. So for people that aren't 18, or for people who can't afford a computer, like because some people can't, they might have that console, it's something to compete in for them. It's like a different route if you're not like if you don't have a ton of money to spend on a computer, and if you're not over 18 but you want to play something competitive, it can be like a proving ground or something to build those fundamentals of teamwork or individual skill that'll carry over somewhere else. And I think what something crazy that's happening with Halo Infinite is we don't know if it's going to be competed on PC or console or whatever, but it's going to be backwards compatible to the Xbox One. So I think that is like a huge gateway to like almost anyone that wants to pick up a game that might not have been able to otherwise. So I think that's super cool that they're doing that.
Yeah, no one's getting left behind in Halo, right?
Which is crazy.
Yeah,
Xbox One, which came out in like what 2013, 2014.
Yeah,
2013. Yeah,
that's crazy.
So Halo as a shooter, what does it have? But maybe more importantly, what doesn't it have in esports?
Ooh, what doesn't Halo have in esports right now? I think
personality. Low-key.
For me, I think there's a lot missing in Halo and this might might seem not like going into esports, but like I think it's the foundation that builds up to the esports side. And for me, I've always felt that like recent Halo, something like Halo 5, I do not think was very friendly to newcomers or casual gamers. And so the way that when I'm defining a game, we didn't get into this yet, but like I did game development for a few years. I have a bachelor's in computer science, uh, and so when I was working on games, or as I evaluate, think about games a lot, as you probably realize, I think about games all the freaking time. But for me, a healthy game and base has, and this is easier said than done. You know, people wrap this in different ways where they say like easy to play but difficult to master or whatever. To me, what it ends up being is it's as low skill floor as possible and as high of a skill ceiling as possible. You're gonna capture, those are the different audiences that you're capturing. And for new Halo comers, people that are just trying to get in the series, when they look at something like Halo 5 was incredibly skillful. Like, don't get me wrong, like the pistol took a lot of skill. The assault rifle took a lot of skill. Like there was a lot of things in Halo 5 that were difficult to do. But that wasn't the problem with Halo 5. It wasn't like, hey, is this difficult enough for the top players? It's like, all right, who are these next generational players of Halo going to be? Who's going to pick up this game for one of the first times, learn it, play it, and be like, awesome, I'm now hooked. I want to play more. I want to learn more and get further. Or who's going to be that casual gamer that picks it up, plays it, and is like, wow, like I really enjoy this game. Like I can't use the pistol effectively, but the assault rifle has a decent amount of auto aim for me, and so I'm able to go around, play with the assault rifle, get some kills, and learn the game. And to me, that's a really important piece of the ecosystem of any healthy game, is that you have newcomers always coming into the game and playing that, because it increases the player base. They're playing, they're telling their friends that they're playing, they're bringing in new users. They're watching the tournaments, they're consuming the content.
Right.
They're potentially being that next generation of amateurs that go into tournaments, maybe pros. So for me, when I look at like what does Halo Esports not have, I think Halo Esports had a huge head start on many other games out there, and ended up losing a lot of the newer generation of players to other games for whatever reasons those happen to be, whether it's different content being able to be created out there, whether from the playing side it was tougher for newer people to get in, and yeah, we were just a few steps behind that. But yeah, for me, the most important part of a game is that it's easy for someone to get into, and it has this unreachable skill ceiling that like the pros can just continue to get better and better and better, and push the limits of the game. And for me, Halo 5 had that high skill ceiling, but its skill floor was too high for me, especially for a console shooter.
That's actually kind of interesting. I think Halo 5 simultaneously had like this ridiculously high skill ceiling while also like not knowing what it wanted to be. So like it's like some things were just way too easy and like, super abusable, which like made it just so easy to like absolutely dominate. And I think for Halo Infinite in particular and esports, it needs a more balanced sandbox. Like in Halo 3, like, they didn't have the assault rifle in the competitive settings, but could you imagine them putting it in? Like I don't think it would like do much of anything other than give you like a melee weapon. In Halo 5, the assault rifle gave you something that you didn't even have to aim. And, for me, like I would just abuse that. Like at certain ranges, you didn't even have to use your magnum or even like try to be like skillful. You could just abuse like the easy thing they put there, or you could do the super skillful thing and completely outplay the people that don't know what's going on. So for Halo Esports, because I think Halo, especially for esports, the one thing that's lacking is that content as well. And Halo is like an amazing content creation tool. Like like machinima, like all that stuff in Halo 3 was just so used, and then Halo 5 just kind of like nobody used it because we all like just complained about the game, I guess. So like people and like all the pros didn't even want to make content creation on the esports side of it. So that's why I said personality when you said like what does Halo Esports lack? And I don't think it actually lacks personality. I think it lacks like the drive to go out there and show off what we already have. Because like I think like I talk to these people all the time. They're interesting people, just nobody knows about it. So I think for moving forward in Infinite, like the first thing I touched on, needs a more balanced sandbox, and then the other point that doesn't relate to the first, like, needs that content that comes out and draws people into the game as well.
I also agree with what you said too, as far as like those kind of the settings were not ideal, like perfectly in Halo 5. Like I felt like there was like some half measures where it tried to satisfy both these audiences. Something like radar and like the assault rifle secondary with the power level is at. I think did not bode well for the top competitive scene. I felt like it took a couple steps back trying to cater to this audience that it was like that skill floor was still out of reach in my eyes.
Well, they've kind of talked about it with Infinite, that they're going to have a campaign and a multiplayer, and one's going to be free to play and one's going to be the game that you purchase. Do you think it's okay to have two separate playlists? One, hey, casual player, have fun in the Halo world, or have fun playing some competitive games. And then competitive player, here's a playlist specifically for you. Go play this. And having those settings different from each other. And
I'd like to start on this. I think they needed to try to be as close as possible. They don't need to be perfectly the same. Like, I think, with some of the Halo 5 updates later on that came too late with the sandbox, like if you put some of that stuff in at the beginning and had the ability radar, and that, like, the ability radar was the only real difference, I think competitive would have been better. So yeah, you need to try to make them as close as possible because it's easy access. Like, you could go from playing Warzone to playing Arena, and like the things would be, similar enough that you could like get it done.
Ideal world from a game design perspective and from a viewer perspective, yes, you want to have them be the exact same. That's the ideal scenario, and you do see that happen from game to game at times, but like, for me, I think Halo has also broken this mold early on. Even from Halo 1, didn't have radar, which was, whatever. We're talking, how many years ago now? Is that 20 years ago?
Yeah,
like
20
literally 20 years ago.
So,
yeah.
So we've already set the standard in competitive Halo 20 years ago that these sort of nuanced differences are what's needed to make the game competitive, because right now Halo and having something like radar is very beneficial for someone in like campaign, or it seems like people really enjoy this in social lists and everything, but it is unviable at the highest level of competitive Halo. It's just the game's too broken. If you can see where someone's trying to flank through, or you start to get numbers, like it's just unviable. And so you can try to find, they've tried to find different like medium grounds, like whether that's like, all right, do you have like a different radar that everyone uses now? Like, is it like an enhanced radar, like an ability radar, like Zane said? And I think there are different steps you can take, but in short, it's different. Like you might have some difference in there between the settings. And so I personally am not opposed to having different settings when warranted, for having the competitive side of Halo versus like a casual or social side. Personally, I've just had difficulty trying to find like, all right, what are these perfect competitive settings that also perfectly cater to the casual audience? And like, I don't know if you fulfill everyone's needs with the exact same set of rules or settings. Right. And open to them if it does. Like I said, that's ideal, but we haven't seen it in 20 years of Halo in my eyes.
Yeah. I mean, I know from a spectator's perspective, when I'm a fan watching a tournament being played, I want to go and test my merit at those skills as well. I watch Zane play and I'm like, dang, he's so good. Like, I wonder what that would feel like to go do that, and then go test my abilities in that and realize that I'm literally just a bot, and I have fun and try my hardest. But, it's cool to jump into those same playlists and kind of get the feel of like, and you get to appreciate it more too. I feel like if you watch a pro play a certain way and then you jump into that game and you try to emulate them, you realize how difficult it is. And I think also from a spectating perspective, when things become more limited and you have those 48 Slayers and that chess match between the two teams, I remember, God, it was like 2016 rig, and it was someone had a sniper on the outside of rig, and inside, and they had to rotate to get the camo, and it was 48-48, and I was just like, it was riveting and it was nail biting, and from a spectating perspective, it was very, very enjoyable to watch. Can we just kind of talk about the struggle between the mechanical skills and that game theory kind of butting heads, and kind of that what we want to see in the game from a spectator's perspective versus a professional perspective?
So from what I understand, as far as like having different mechanics that are maybe exciting to watch, but like end up being game breaking at a higher level, those essentially have to go. I mean, sure, it would be, I think it's one of the reasons that we all love watching something like poker on TV, or why they were able to commercialize that is, wow, like this is pretty kind of crazy and random. Like this person has a 2% chance of losing this hand, even though they beat, and then they river something and they win or whatever. Like that's just inherently exciting to watch. Like sometimes when there's like randomness on the line, that when you have higher stakes out there, especially, and that can be exciting. But for a competitive esport, for me, I would define a competitive esport needing to have like an acceptable level of randomness. And I think that, to me, I'm not saying that an esport can't have any randomness. In fact, I do think like an acceptable level of randomness is a very vague term. I like to say that an esport should have. And so when you have those little random moments that happen from time to time, like let's say it happens to be a sniper ricochet bullet or whatever like that, and that hits, and like I think that's an acceptable level of randomness that maybe not even fully random, because there's times where you can actually plan that and hit that. But the second that gets broken and it can be busted at top level, like that part, it's game breaking. The team gets whatever they need to get, whether it's a specific position or let's look at it from like a super jump perspective. Like you weren't allowed to super jump in Halo 2 in tournaments. Technically, like that could be really fun for a spectator to watch someone fly way up in the air, and like people would go woo for the first time that happens. But like, it's clearly game breaking, and I don't know how to properly define that line of like this crosses into game breaking versus this being acceptable. But for me, it's, hey, does this mechanic or piece in question add depth to the game? Is it skillful for the game? And if those are both yes, and I would say, okay, now is it game breaking for the game? And if that's also a yes, it really needs to be reevaluated. However, if those other two are yeses, like it's fun, it's skillful, I would say like you probably keep something like that in. I mean, that's the almost the definition of something like a BXR or a double shot or whatever. Like it was skillful. It wasn't you had to take some forms of risks in certain cases for like a double shot. Like BXR wasn't as much of a risk, but they really did add to the game, and they also weren't like game breaking. And I can't think of like what recently may have been game breaking. There might be things that kind of like that really go close to that line, or it's like, all right, it's not game breaking, but it's really frustrating that you can't punish this. That could also be evaluated, and hopefully with a well done game, those sort of areas are like ironed out ahead of time. You have somebody that can get an eye on it, highlight it, and say like, this detracts from the value of the game because of X, Y, or Z. You should always have in a good game different ways that you can punish your opponents or capitalize on their mistakes. And at some points, if you're able to like mask those periods over, smooth those over, I would say that's just poor game design.
Okay, yeah. No, I totally agree with Dave. Like, and that goes back to kind of like the sandbox thing. Like, something shouldn't be good in every situation. It should have its like specific situation, and then it goes into that game theory of when to use things. So like I said, like in Halo 3, if you put the AR into MLG, like how crazy would it be? Probably not like that crazy. But like in Halo 5, when that game launched, like I was talking about, things are just too easy. Like Storm Rifle, pretty much like good in like way too many situations. Assault Rifle, good in way too many situations. Halo 5 rockets, you get 4 rockets every 2 minutes, which was the first time that rockets had ever spawned every 2 minutes in a Halo game. They were the easiest rockets in the game. Like if you see someone cross map pushing up the map, you could shoot a rocket at them and it's there instantly. It's the freest kill. So it goes into that like balance, like Spartan charge. If you shoot someone one time with the DMR, you can Spartan charge them. Like that's kind of broken, and thank God pros didn't know about that, because if they did, I guarantee you shots he would have been peeping the corner, shooting me once with the DMR, going back behind the corner, sprinting at me and Spartan charging me and getting a free kill. But like, so like stuff like that, it has to be like, balanced and situational to make it skillful. Like if you pull out the AR every time and you're getting a kill every single time, like that's probably needs to be reevaluated. If you pull the AR out and you get absolutely owned like you would in Halo 3 by the battle rifle, you're gonna be like, oh man, I should probably pick up the battle rifle and use that in this situation versus only using the AR 24/7 all the time. It gets repetitive. I think that's what they really need to think about going into Halo Infinite, like what's good when, and nothing should be good all the time.
So how do games evolve over time, and how do we adapt to those challenges and changes?
I think the main way games change over time, especially if it's like the same game, Halo, we have changes in settings, so that's like one thing. But if it's like, the same game, unless they're like updating it, you have to get good at whatever's like the best way to play pretty much. So in Halo 5, everybody had a certain way to play, and then they changed all the settings up, and now you see Splice just flying around like crazy. Like, we have the ability radar, so there's different ways to push up and like own people, so you have to learn a different way to play, and you have to just like go back to basics kind of and like regrind and like relearn just by playing all the time. And like, but as far as like, games updating, like my brother, like Dota 2, they send out like this massive list of everything that's ever changed. Like you might have to like keep up with all those kind of changes. Like he reads the whole thing and he knows like what he can and can't do now. So, there's different things that happen in games. I think for Halo in particular, I'm really interested to see what they're going to do in Infinite, because it's supposed to be like a 10-year game. So I don't know how they're going to be changing that up all the time, but maybe it's just being knowledgeable and on top of what they're putting out, or like the minor changes in the sandbox, whatever that may be. And just playing all the time is a great way to like keep up with the curve, keep up with everyone else.
New maps, right? Maybe?
Maybe, but they might change the sandbox as well. You never know.
Yeah, there's lots of different tools at their disposal of what they can change within a game, but the main part to keep in mind with one of the best games, like if you create one of the best games ever, you really don't have to like change much. Like you look at some games that have stood the test of time, something like a Counter-Strike Go. It's definitely different from Counter-Strike 1.6, but like people have felt that's close enough, and like that has, I'm sure it's had patches and changes, but for the most part, like Dust 2 is still Dust 2, and that map has been played now for who knows how many years, 25 or more years or whatever. And it's the same for if you look at like, if you make a esports to sports analogy, like basketball is still basketball, baseball is still baseball. Like
right.
There's a lot of enjoyment if you get the base mechanics and feedback loops down correctly for a game. Smash Melee's found this, there's not like they're releasing new characters or new patches and stuff, and people are still grinding that game. Are they actually?
No, they have been. They have been modding Melee and adding new characters, which is, I don't know if they're going to use it competitively, but that's kind of interesting thing, interesting route.
I think this is proving my point a little bit, but the point being, like, as you know, it's like, it sounds like they may have been adding a little bit more in there now within Melee, but like for whatever 20 plus years, Smash Melee has been the exact same. You've played with the same characters, the same maps, and the mechanics and the fulfillment you get from playing that game is so enjoyable that people just go back to that over and over and over again. It's not like they're going back because it has these new bells and whistles of a new map or a new character. It's like, no, this was just done nearly flawlessly in their eyes, and just so rewarding. And so I think that part can't be overlooked. Like I think how good the game is so damn important, and you can, all this other stuff is additive and it amplifies on how good that base game is. Like, what are those other things you do? Is it a season pass and release maps in these cadences, or why and what patch changes do you make or adjustments do you make as it comes out? But like, if that base experience is so good, you can not have some other pieces in there, those additive pieces, or you could miss a couple of other spots, and people will still be there to play it, watch it, consume it.
Yeah, I love how you looked outwards into baseball and basketball. Those have been around for so long, and the fields have never changed, and maybe minor rules have changed, but overall the base, everything's remained pretty stood the test of time, I guess we could say. So that's really interesting. So Dave, from like playing in 2003, you started your pro career in Halo CE?
Yeah, I think pro is a pretty loose definition back then. But yeah, I mean, I think I went to my first tournament in 2002.
Cool. Well, so seeing those Halos kind of progress and keep playing one Halo sequentially to the next Halo, how does that feel, and how are you adapting to those changes, the new game, the new meta? How does that evolve over time, and how are you adapting to it?
Yeah, one thing that's interesting from like a Halo player perspective compared to, and this seems to be like holding true for a lot of like console FPS players, like Halo, Call of Duty, Gears of War, that it seems like the games have quite a bit of change, from game to game, or they have at least noticeable or drastic differences. Not enough to the point where it's like somebody who is the best in the game can't compete anymore in the next title or anything like that, but it likely can or does change maybe who is considered the best in that game. Compared to, you look at like other, like let's say a PC title, a League of Legends, a Counter-Strike, like a lot of those players get a chance to play that game, and yes, there's going to be different metas or patches, but they are essentially playing their exact same game or close enough to that same version of that game for years on end without having to make like this drastic shift every 1 to 3 or 4 years or 5 years. Come on, Halo Infinite.
6 years.
Yeah, 6 years, whatever. It's like, so I think that's one thing that's really unique about Halo is you have to have that adaptability, and in short, you have to grind and learn what's important in that game. Yes, a lot of your aiming skill is going to translate, but there's going to be differences between a game that's hit scan versus having to lead. There's going to be differences in the movement, something that was really strong before. It's like, all right, like now, in Halo 3, it's like, if we're going from Halo 2 to Halo 3, like, I'll take it from the beginning, from Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3, like, close range battles in Halo 1. Pretty horizontal. You would sometimes go up for a quick double melee or whatever, or a melee, which is powerful, but like you didn't really have many vertical battles. In Halo 2, you added verticality along with different button combos, and so close range combat was very, very important there. And then you kind of had this different shift to like Halo 3. It's like Halo 3, it's turned into like double shot melee, and maybe you're jumping around. You need to have a high sensitivity to be really strong in some of those closer range combats. And like those are 3 different styles of combat just within the close range combat style of play within Halo throughout 3 different ones. And so I was arguably one of the best in like Halo 1 or Halo 2, especially in like close range combat. And then Halo 3, I didn't have the same sort of comfortability with like verticality and a higher sense compared to opponents. And so like going from maybe somebody who had a very aggressive or close range play style in like Halo 1 or Halo 2 to that now being maybe an area I'm not as strong compared to some of my opponents in Halo 3, that's a shift, something you gotta adapt to and learn how to, maybe make up for an area that I'm not as strong in. But it's all of, learning what your strengths and weaknesses are, adapting best you can and playing to those strengths and addressing those weaknesses and trying to improve on those as you're learning that game, and putting in a lot of hours. A new game comes out, putting in a lot of hours early because you want to be playing leader of the pack versus catch up if possible.
What needs to be done on launch day of Infinite and, preluding the launch day as well for the game to be fundamentally successful as far as an FPS shooter, Dave?
For it to be fundamentally successful, and I won't even say as an FPS shooter, I'll say as a Halo title, which obviously is an FPS shooter, but like I think it has to stay true to what Halo fans expect. And I know there's different expectations when it comes to nuances within Halo of like, who, should there be sprint, should there be no sprint, like all those sort of have different buying sides. But like I think there is more common ground than differences. And some of them are going to be super obvious, where it's like, hey, should you have recoil when you're running and shooting or jumping and shooting? And most people, you ask 99% of Halo fans are like, probably not. I mean, that's not in the game. But like, you look at different ways that Halo has experimented and maybe like broke that, or like, done stuff like, let's say like Bloom and Halo Reach. And or like even Halo Reach, like crouching and shooting, like condensed your bloom, and so like there's different things in there that to me are like, all right, well, like if I talk to the designers or lead designer of Halo and say like, all right, is this what belongs in Halo, what's not? I would hope that they would have a very unified voice on like what they believe makes a Halo game, and I would hopefully and ideally agree with most, if not all of that. So that's a long way of saying like I want to be true to Halo fans, and you're not going to please everyone. There are definitely different opinions, but I think there are a lot of areas where Halo fans are going to be in very strong agreement in what makes a Halo game. But it goes back to like, is this game fundamentally sound and fun? And like that sounds like a cop-out answer, but like, can I just jump on, play this game, have the time of my life because I have all these little rewarding moments that I have fun with? Am I going to want to jump on, play with my friends? Like, right. Excluding tournaments or prize money or anything like that, is the game fun to get on? Or am I getting on and am I walking into, is it like a UI nightmare to invite friends in the game? Am I having bugs or features missing that are impacting my enjoyment of playing the game? Is there ways for people easily to like grief or break the game? Is it, is there too many different spots on the map that aren't balanced, that it's abusive? And like, in short, it has to be fun. It doesn't have to be flawless. You can have issues, and that's expected, especially if like a new game with so much surface area and so much going on. But is the game fun? Am I going to want to pick up and play this game 15 years from now? Because there are games like Halo 1 and Halo 2 and even Halo 3, like there's games that people have in their repertoire that like, I want to pick this up from years from now and play it again because I enjoy this game and I think it has a positive feedback loop. I think it's well balanced at the highest level. And yeah, I care that it's a fun, enjoyable experience, and everything builds off of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Zane, what are you expecting on launch day of Infinite and preluding Infinite, and what's important for those fundamentals for the game to be successful?
For me, with the way the H2A MCC launch went, and kind of Halo 5 too, I think it just needs to have a solid, good launch and like work, because this game hasn't come out for 6 years. Like Dave said, the UI needs to not be a nightmare. You need to be able to get people in lobbies and play the game. And on a more like, just FPS in general, like fundamentally sound game goes, like even with like the Reach PC launch, like things need to function on PC and console. So like when Reach launched, like PC was total garbage for everyone playing on mouse and keyboard, and it just didn't work how it should have, and people couldn't aim how they should be able to aim. It needs to just function. It doesn't need to be perfect. Like the sandbox, I know I've been saying the sandbox needs to be good, and like, things need to have like that utility. It doesn't need to be perfect. Like things can be broken and fixed later on in that sense, but just on that base level of being able to get on and play the game and have fun playing the game, that needs to be a thing. And like, it just needs to function for everyone on both PC and console. Got to be able to find some games the first day on. Got to give people a reason to come back and not just instantly turn them off like MCC did.
Right.
Twice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of pressure on those devs' backs, right? They have a huge franchise that, may hinge on the success of or failure of this new game, right? As heavy-hearted as it is to say that as a fan, we all want to see Halo succeed and whatnot.
First impressions are important, and this game hasn't come out for 6 years, so it's almost like they get kind of like that do-over. And yeah, people complained about it getting delayed again, but I think there's a lot of hype surrounding the game, so nailing that launch is going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Dave, can I just take a second to just like fanboy out with you for a little bit and just say that like I remember watching, God, it was like on ESPN, there was a Halo match, and I just remember being a kid just being like, who are these people and what are they doing and what is this thing called Halo? And I think maybe a lot of people could attest to just like remembering you playing Halo and just being like, dang, this is a cool, curious industry. So I just wanted to kind of just address the legend in the room.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. It's it was really fun and still is really intriguing kind of growing through this massive growth in esports. Starting off from playing whatever Halo in my parents' house and playing with high school friends to going to some tournaments to being on USA Network on TV to seeing where esports is now to packing up stadiums or the Staples Center. Like, that's insane to see how much that has grown. It started off from me being like, oh, that'd be cool if I could win $50 at a tournament or whatever, to like, like
Getting sponsored by Red Bull.
Yeah, being the first sponsored by Red Bull, or like seeing, the boggling prize pools that people are competing for nowadays within, Halo tournaments and other, especially other games out there, like Booga winning whatever it was, $3 or $6 million for first place for Fortnite. Like,
yeah.
Just that's insane to me, that growth where it's like, let's say Halo Esports is maybe one of the bigger North American esports at the time in 2006, and our national finals was 100 grand split 4 ways if you took first. To what, 15 or not even 15 years later, like 13 years later, to Booga or someone like that winning $6 million for first place in a Fortnite tournament. It's like that rate of growth, and to like be alongside that the entire way is it's something special, and it's like something that it's been really cool to like see grow and be a part of and recognize.
Did you ever think it would be what it is today back then?
As I started to see growth in it, yes, but I don't think I expected it to grow this fast. And I think that's a totally fair statement to say, is it being like, oh wow, like it's easy to see how passionate people are about gaming, and knowing how there's going to be a massive market for that, and that there's going to be smart people that know how to build an experience around that or market around it. But to see it grow that fast, it's I think esports in some ways has like kind of gone through its waves. Sometimes it grows really fast and maybe like takes a little dip or whatever if you're looking at like prize money or different pieces of the industry. But yeah, definitely grew faster than I expected. But as I sit back and evaluate it, it's like, maybe at the time it was just completely undervalued and nobody was really tapping into it or understanding how to tap into it. And now games are focusing with esports in mind at the forefront, understand how impactful it is. You now have content creators amplifying everything. You have social media to tie everything together.
Right.
And every single year you have a significant percentage of the population that are going to be born technically literate and with gaming as a potential interest. And, as far as older generations right now, like, they aren't interested in gaming. So every single year you have a new year of population entering that has a really strong chance of being involved in gaming or esports in some way.
Yeah. There's so many job titles and avenues now in the esports realm that are offered, whether it's, content creation to managerial positions to logistics or finances. I mean, it's become a whole kind of new and improved like job title at this point.
God, yeah, everyone like doing the esports job titles and stuff. It's just like, it's funny how it's like this new buzzword where it's like I'm almost like taking a step back now and like calling things like gaming now, because like I think people like use this all-encompassing word of esports when it's like, all right, I consider esports the top competitive stuff, but like I would consider like other people like content creators or avid gamers. Like it's just crazy how powerful that term is nowadays in like the business world.
Yeah. I'd love to hear just you or the differentiation. That's it. Between the two, esports and just like job titles in general. What is the definition of esports to you?
Esports to me is based around a esports worthy game or whatever, and to me esports worthy game is just like a very skillful game that has all those different elements. Like, is it fundamentally sound? Is it played not only just for prize money? Is it played for fun, and it's competitive and people enjoy it? It has its own communities and everything along those lines.
Yeah.
Like to me, I consider, whether it's a smaller, let's say it was like a random fighting game tournament that maybe people still play Street Fighter 2 or for whatever reason, like I'd consider that esport. Like I don't care how big their prize money is per year. Like it's a very competitive game. And in the same sense that like something like competitive Fortnite's like an esport. Like any game that creates that platform for people, in my eyes, is an esport. Now you get into the small nuances of like, all right, like what, does it matter how much viewership somebody's getting, and like all those pieces do come into play. Or like how, what role does prize money have? And in most cases, prize money does
pull in views.
yeah, pulls in views, or it goes along with at least around the audience sizes. Like I think those sometimes scale up. Like there's definitely some games that have inequalities. Like even if I'm going to be harsh on Halo for a second, I think there's times where like prize money has outpaced and also underpaced how important the game was. Like there's been times where the prize money was probably more than we had as far as the current like ecosystem of Halo, and it can be beneficial for that tournament, but that can also like bite you in the long run at some points where people are like, oh well, we need this much money to be successful, or like they look at it as like almost like a big step back or drop when there's tournaments that aren't of that scale. Or you look at something like Smash Melee, where I think compared to how hardcore and competitive its audience has been for years, I think it's been severely underpaid. And that's just how some games go. It's like, but for the most part, I would say like most of them seem to kind of track on with the amount of money you're making from prize money or sponsorships or team fees or whatever, based on the popularity of the game and how influential it is in the scene.
Yeah. Well, is there any last remarks, comments, concerns, suggestions to conclude our podcast? Practice makes perfect.
Ooh. I'm not sure. At least I never got to bust this out. Funny enough, when you brought me on to the Playing to Win podcast, I had this book on my shelf from good old David Serlin. If you don't know who he is, he was a competitive, I want to say he was like Street Fighter 1 or Street Fighter 2 player. He was also, he's just a genius. He does a lot of game design and creating like board games and other games. But cool. He wrote this interesting book from Playing to Win, which I would say like covers a lot of like playing to win topics, like on I would say like a pretty, I don't want to say lower level, but like I would say at the time he was writing this book, he was definitely encountering probably different issues than we encounter today. Like if I remember some parts of it, I haven't brushed up on it recently, but like before, back in the day, people would call stuff like cheap, where it's like, oh, like doing like a BXR combo is cheap, you shouldn't be doing that. And it's like, Gotcha. All right, like it covers concepts like, well, it's playing to win. Like, is this within the rule set of the game? Does this make sense? But had to at least bust that out for the Playing to Win podcast.
Definitely going to have to give it a read. Zane, anything to conclude? Practice makes perfect?
Just to end, I'd like to say, Dave, I like your shirt. And just by the way, the NBA Jam, I like that. And, just big shout out to you, Dave, for coming on. You're a Halo legend. Like, he fanboyed. I get to fanboy now, even though, I'm a pro now, whatever. Like, you're one of the reasons why I compete today, because of back then, like, getting to watch you guys, on the main stage, getting, like, going off, like, getting super excited. I'm going to try to bring more of that in Halo Infinite and getting excited. I know I've been kind of one of those robots, never did an interview. You'll be seeing more of me. And I wanted to thank you for getting me into the claw grip. Because I saw like a little short video. I saw a little short video in Halo 3. I was like, wait, what is this? And I see Dave show like, yeah, you hold the controller like this. I'm like, wait, I never thought about it like that. And I've clawed ever since then. So thank you, man.
Oh my God. All right. First off, thank you so very much for the kind words. Like, I think there's like, it's always, that's one area I never get sick of, is like hearing anyone that comes up to me that says like, hey, you inspired me to get into gaming, or I really enjoyed this part about gaming. But like, it's also so impactful, like when I hear it from, someone like yourself, like someone like that's a top pro today, or like a top content creator, influencer today. Like that part to me like is really special because it's like, all right, like that's like I was at that phase before and like seeing kind of the next generation if I had like at least some form of impact or positive impact. That's really meaningful to me. So think of those kind of words. But when you brought up the claw grip, I can't believe I didn't say this part earlier when we were talking about close range combat in Halo 1, 2, and 3. When we got to Halo 3, you had bumpers. Before, people had to fight against my claw with no freaking bumpers, and they stood zero chance. And then, of course, Halo 360 comes out with bumpers, and people that even leveled the playing field a bit more. But like, think about those sort of changes that I had to go through in my days, where I was just destroying
this is
non-clawed normies, as I call them.
No, this is crazy because now we have paddles, and I feel the same way. I felt the same way about paddles when Scuff was first a thing. I was like, dude, I'm clawing, owning these people, and now they get a paddle, and then like in Halo 5, everyone gets a paddle. I'm like, dude, I would dominate all these people in movement if they couldn't have paddles. It's just like
a circle of life. I used to get a paddling when I was younger, and then I developed the claw, destroyed people in Halo, developed bumpers, and that destroyed the claw, and now the bumpers get a paddling. So it's just a circle of life right there. Bro. Paddle, back to paddle.
I can spring jump every single time because I hot map my paddle to my A button, and it's really good for us.
That's what I do now. Even, but if I didn't, if I don't have the paddle, I can still spring jump every time though because I can still claw.
I mean, that's the evolution of gaming, though. That's something that we didn't even talk about. The game may progress, but technology's also progressing, right? Like the new console, the Xbox Series X is 120 frames per second, which is crazy to think about a console at that much like high like frame rate, and the RAM and the teraflops and the whatever. I mean, the image and processing of that Xbox is pretty up there now.
Oh, we could go on for hours about that. I remember when Reach PC dropped, controller wasn't broken, mouse and keyboard was, but it was 144 frames per second. Everyone hits everything in Halo 3 nowadays, dude. Right? You know how hard it is to hit someone across the map on narrows on a 480i CRT monitor, 30 frames per second? Good luck, dude. Like, it's just not happening. Today, you just see these guys hitting, like, kill-tastrophes, killionaires. Like, just, like, they don't even try. Like, I mean, that's just something else we could talk about forever, but
yeah. I mean, I just remember also that, what was it? The Xbox that came into 4K, whatever. There was the Xbox One and then the Xbox One X.
Yeah.
Right? There's the Xbox Series X and there's the Xbox One X. It's hard to not get those confused sometimes. But when that came out, you could see camo, right?
Oh, yeah. You can see camo. So you could shoot camo across map. They're going to need to make camo better in Halo Infinite, low-key.
Yeah. So with technology progressing, developing games and the knowledge of developing a game, I think there's a lot of SPS theory that we've now learned from the games before us. What makes Halo Halo and what makes other competitive games a competitive game also keeps us moving forward, right? And so not only does technology progress, but we kind of get to build off of the shoulders of the Dave Walshies of the world, and the Og twins, and the T-squares and the snipe downs and the penguins, and we get to kind of see what all of you pros have done to manipulate the game, or not just to analytically or use that brain power to figure out what's going to get you the win, right?
Yeah. 100%. And as things continue to progress, don't forget the people who came before you, because like even today, like you talked about bumpers being added, but claw grip is still like super prevalent, especially at a top level of every console shooter. Like I think someone did a poll of like who claws and who doesn't, and it was like 70-something% of just the general population doesn't claw, and it's like 20-something does. I promise you, way more pros claw than don't. So it's still like a important thing if you do play console, if you can claw. So don't forget those who came before you, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Dave, does the theories carry through all of the games before us? Does, for the most part, theory carry through?
I would say so. I think at the highest level of play, you really have to get into very nuanced details on specific maps and specific situations and what to do and how to best support there. But yes, the general overall theories apply, where it's like, all right, here's, spreading out so that you have crossfire opportunities, having, how to play the situation when you have someone who's flanking, how to play a situation when you're down in numbers or up in numbers, and a lot of those general theories apply, but like for each specific game and each specific map/game type, like you do need to get into some of those nitty-gritties, because at some points it's like, all right, like this doesn't fully apply in this area. In fact, like we now need to go block Mauler in this case, and most of the time when you're all on this side, you're all safe, but there's this one area that you now have to block this specific spawn and play it different or whatever. Like there's definitely small nuances, but that's one of the exciting parts of the game, is that it's just not fully solved, and that it's such a skillful and strategic game. That's what I really love about Halo.
Thank you two so much for joining us, Zane, being a co-host on this podcast. I have a hiatus coming up. I'm going to be in Japan for a little bit doing the 2020 Olympics.
Winning the Olympics.
No, just being a part of it, helping it go smoothly. But
on the production end.
Yeah, on the production side of things, just making sure everything runs smoothly. So thank you both for being here on episode 6, Practice Makes Perfect. I'd also like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on episode 6, and I hope that this podcast has helped you improve inside of the game, especially this one, and outside of the game, whether it's making friends, being a healthier gamer, or creating content, or just understanding, in episode 4, how events run, and hopefully that has helped you figure out this whole esports or gaming world. Doesn't have to just be on the sports side of things, but hopefully we've increased your quality of life. So thanks for joining us on Playing to Win, and we'll see you in a little while.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. How'd it feel?
That's awesome. Had a good time.